Beautiful. Well, look at this. We got two guests in 2 weeks now. Here's I got Ben with me. I'll let him introduce himself, and we can kind of explain what our situations are and how we got here and blah 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 as we continue conversing. But yeah, take it away, Ben.
Well, my name is Ben Kendrick. Uh, I work with Shay. I'm a coworker of Shay's. It's how we got to know each other was through work. We started working in Medicine Hat together, and ever since then, we've just kind of been working on and off with each other. Um, and yeah, this is my it's the first time doing a podcast.
I love
Uh,
that. I'm gonna keep on breaking people's cherries. I'm just gonna go around my city here and just be like, hey, I know you. You want to be on my podcast? And then they're constantly gonna introduce themselves by saying, I've never been on a podcast before. Like neither have I really. I created this, so it's not like we're big or anything. It's not like I got 1,000 viewers or even more than like 20. So, you know,
But you got rack up that cherry popping number with
exactly.
everybody that you
It's gonna
get.
be
So
everyone's first time.
oh, it's funny.
But
So
yeah, I mentioned earlier on, I was like, if you had any ideas for something that you wanted to talk about, I got a few to flow off of here. But if you wanted to speak about something that you might be thinking is apt to the podcast theme, are more than welcome.
for right now, I'll let you go ahead and take care. Start off with some of your ideas, and then I'll throw some different things in.
So
So
my idea, and I think that you and I would work really well having this conversation about this because we already do it at work all the time. Um, is talking about narrative, talking about stories, and how like we can break it down. We can go into specific details if we want, like about death specifically, like we did talk about earlier on, and I'll go on a little bit of a tangent to kind of kick us off. But we talked about earlier on how like how Game of Thrones was one of those shows that everyone was like, it just all of a sudden had a huge cult following and everyone was like watching it. Like it became so big that I talk about this story every now and again where I was in Japan in the final season of Game of Thrones, and I was there for a month, and every foreigner that we met, me and my buddy that I went with, were like asking us, "You watch Game of Thrones?" It was a guaranteed question. And it was baffling to me because like I've had many conversations through bartending and all these other things, and I've never been like, while I was bartending for 5 days a week, I wouldn't get asked this question every day, you know. But when I was in Japan, it was every single time I met somebody else that wasn't from Japan, they asked me like, "Oh, you watch Game of Thrones?" And I mean, obviously, there's reasons for that. The last season of Game of Thrones was absolute dog shit. But besides that, it was still like, surprising. So clearly it had reached enough homes. And one of the things that I mentioned to you, either like this week or last week or something, was how it had so much expectation destruction, right? Where any character could die at any moment. I'm sure this is talked about a million times by a million different people, but the death aspect where your character doesn't have that plot armor. And I've talked about this in the podcast where I had the feeling of being a protagonist. It's that idea that any protagonist in a story, you kind of just automatically assume that person's not going to die. If you got 10 books in a series, you're just going to be like, chances are that person's not going to die. And there's few situations, few movies, animes, blah, 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 that I've seen where that they don't follow that, but usually it always has a very specific reason, and it's an apt death or whatever, right? But the Game of Thrones had that complete like switch where literally it's just a bunch of people in medieval times trying to live their lives with some little bit of trinkle of magic in here and there, and the people that have any sort of magical powers are like overpowered. They're fighting normal people while they have trump cards beyond belief.
yeah,
But the death aspect of these characters is like you're watching any character and you're like, this person could die. There's no plot armor in this show, at least from what you feel like when you're watching it. Obviously, finishing it, you can kind of look back. Oh yeah, that character always had plot armor. But
yeah. No, I agree, and I guess I think part of what made that show so good is because I feel like it's more realistic, more relatable. When you're like like you said, like a lot of times we with death we have a sense of plot armor. Like we think because it's our story that we're immune to any type of death befalling us. But in reality, it's more like Game of Thrones, where anybody can die at any time. And I think that's why Game of Thrones is so relatable in that aspect, is because that's the reality of it. Is any of us can die at any time, and and because of that fact, I just I feel like that Game of Thrones did so well with that aspect. I enjoyed Game of Thrones because of it, because it's like, oh man, like I could get attached to this character, and but all of a sudden they could be taken away at any time. You know, it's like
Exactly.
it always there was that suspenseful feeling of like, oh man, like my favorite characters that like nobody is safe.
Yeah.
Nobody, anybody could die at any time.
Yeah.
So
And I think that's the reason I was trying to get into, was that it like spreads out so far. It was one of those shows that like so many different people were watching it, you know. It didn't have that like specific niche where, you know, if you talk like talking about one of the things that's on the kind of fresh in my mind is like Wheel of Time. I haven't seen the show. I haven't read the books. I don't know anything really about it besides one of my friends who has read all the books. Um, but that show, I had no desire. Like, sure, maybe it has some cool fantasy, and it might have a really good story, and I might want to watch it. But I had no real like drive to. Whereas like Game of Thrones was so big that literally everyone in my family was watching it, basically. So it was just constantly like everyone. It was a big communal aspect of, oh my, did you see that last episode? Oh, did you see that last season? Oh my god, you know. And you can basically talk about it to anyone because everyone's seen it. And that spreading part, I think, was part in part because of what you're saying, of there being this like relatableness. It was much more, it was less niche. Obviously, it's fantasy. And so there's going to be
yeah,
that like magical, there's going to be some fudge details and whatever. But um, it had that more like, you know, this is probably what most likely medieval times, besides the magic, would have been like in many ways, where people are poisoning each other, people are backstabbing each other, kings are dying, and wars are being held off of stupid, frivolous things, and excuse me, all those kinds of stuff. And that relatable thing, that spread, it's like, it's to me, the reason I wanted to talk about it was because that, like, maybe there's something to changing the way we talk and have stories around death, and how we tell a story and how we have death in those stories changes, like, or makes it more relatable, right? Makes it more commonplace.
oh, I
Like,
agree.
yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, yeah, no, I totally agree. Um, because it's like, I think where a lot of people, when it comes to the certain like trope or plot of where like this hero, like there's no way that the main character is gonna die. I feel like that's what all of us want to feel like.
Yeah,
I want all of us want to feel like that we're not gonna die. But I have with some of my favorite stories is that you like Game of Thrones, but it's like the character can the main character can possibly die at any moment, and that to me for like a lot of stories is like like it's suspenseful. It's something that keeps you on your toes throughout the entire story. Is like when you it's nice to not know that the main character is going to make it out of it, you know, because it's like because I feel like with most stories, the main character is like guaranteed. Like it's like, oh, this ordeal is happening. Oh well, like you know, they're gonna get out of it. Like they're the main character. They're gonna get out of it. Whereas like Game of Thrones, it's like they could have their head chopped off. You know, they
yeah,
could there's a high probability that they're not gonna make it out of it. And so approaching death within like different stories, I think that's kind of where I think would really help out. Like with any type of stories like movies and different things like that, how death is portrayed if it's being portrayed in a different light, then I think that it would change a lot of people's perspective when it comes to death, because the stories and like storytelling, books, movies, all that has a big influence on the way that a lot of us think. So
Well, yeah, that's a good like segue into one thing I wanted to make a point of was and this is really rusty on my background here, but somewhere out there I remember hearing about how like there's different forms of like how we research and study humans and psychology and stuff. And
mm,
one of the things that people talk about all the time is how language changes how people think.
yep,
And there's a whole linguistic background. But then on top of like what language you're speaking and how that kind of forms the way you think. And I mean, it might even have like a specific, it's like that dyslexia thing where you have that what you can visualize sound or whatever, or you have the voice in the back of your head, and some people
yep,
don't have that. It's that kind of thing, that language has that kind of base background of your thoughts and kind of narrates your story as you go through it. But um this this narrative of death, we kind of like when we're going around and listening to stories and watching movies, we watch these Marvel movies and all that stuff, and they kind of all have the same framework and structure. They follow the same climactic moment, and somewhere in each movie, so long as it's a good movie, I would say, has some sort of deep meaning, has some sort of life lesson or whatever, right? Some of them
yep.
are really stupid life lessons, like don't be mean, but like but like there is still some sort of meaning. So when we're watching these movies and listening to these stories and reading these books and so on, you have these kind of this we are trying to gain something from it more so than just like, there's this guy with the power to, light his hands on fire and he beat up a bunch of bad guys. And, that's not the main point of the story. The main point is it's deeper than that. And these moments of death and the small, like how death is related in these stories. Like I want to bring up the book series that you and I listen to on Audible. And I don't really want to name names. I try to avoid being very specific, which is calling things out. Game of Thrones is so big that I don't think it matters. But other things like this one audiobook that we listened to, the one that's 9 books on Audible, that one where death is so frivolous because the main character can die like multiple times and just keeps
Mhm.
coming back. Yet
Yep,
everyone around him is looking at him like, no, that doesn't happen. Death is permanent, right?
yeah,
Everyone else in the story has this idea that death is permanent. But this main character, for whatever reason, his plot armor is just different. His plot armor doesn't make him invincible. It just makes him so he can come back from the dead 100 times, like, and
yeah,
that kind of makes death seem kind of frivolous because he's blown off as just kind of like a Joe Schmo, like just a guy, right? That just so happens to have different mental views on things. And that causes his growth as a person and power and blah, blah, blah. But the deaths that he can avoid cause this disconnect with me as a listener slash reader and the story, because the plot armor is different, where the main character just dies and reincarnates, basically comes back, but all the characters around that character have this like death is permanent, right? They don't have
mhm,
that same feeling. So it confuses me, and it confuses the characters obviously in the story,
yeah.
and I don't like it, man. I like We've talked our griefs about this story a lot, but that's one of those things where I don't think we've talked about yet, and it's very
No,
frustrating.
well, it's like even one of the side characters dies in one of the earlier books and then comes back in like
What,
what's
4?
book 4.
Yeah.
And so you get semi attached to her in the beginning, but then she dies, and then all of a sudden she's like a very key character the rest of the series, like a majority of the rest of the series. And so it's like even when you even have like side characters that come back because of his plot armor, it's just kind of, yeah, that disconnect of death, um to where it's pretty much like a revive coin. Like you can die as many times as you want, and you can keep coming back. It doesn't matter. And where like like you said, It's like other characters, they die and they're done. Other like even other antagonists against him, they die
Yeah,
and they don't come back.
exactly.
And so, yeah, there is definitely a disconnect with that within that story, and it is frustrating a bunch of times because then it's just like it's like the his it's like he's invincible essentially, and so it's just like there's not a ton of suspense around some of the different things that he does because you're like, oh man, he can just die and then he can come back. It's not like there's anything really gonna affect him on as far as the storyline goes, besides maybe other people that are around him. But
But yeah, like I think I want to try to get us to the point of like this is our narrative of this conversation thus far. What is the meaning? What are we trying to get at here? What is the purpose of this conversation? And I think the point I think we should try to focus on is that idea of how much of an impact conversations, stories, books, movies, blah blah blah, all those types of media forms have, how they portray death can impact how that story is received and how it also, how the meaning of it is portrayed. Like if the whole meaning of the story is just, hey, bad guys are evil and they don't deserve to live, whatever it might be, bad guys are evil, they deserve to be punished, that's a really mundane and like boring meaning. But if we were to use that and say, and this, in this story, the only people that die are the bad guys, you're kind of putting this one-sided um good always prevails mentality, and it doesn't, it's not always the case. There's many things in life when we're going about
I
life. Go ahead if you got some.
I was gonna say I would say that the majority of the time I don't think necessarily good prevails. I mean, especially in today's world, I think there's a lot more bad out there. Like just even within even within Canada, even without like a lot outside of Canada, in a lot of different countries, I think there's a lot more bad that prevails than there is good.
And
So
that is a side of the coin. Like there's those famous there's famous starting philosopher. Like if you were to get a philosopher starter kit, you would listen to you would read like Plato's Republic, you'd read like Thomas Hobbes, and like what's the other guy's name? I think it's another Thomas, but or John or something. But those guys, they had this different political view about what humans, what their nature is, whether they start off as a blank slate, the tabula rasa, they start off as just like a painting that needs to have an imprint, and then they can form the colors of it or whatever, right? They shape their life as they go. The
mhm.
little baby that is born, and you might have a better perspective having children of your own, but they are or a different perspective. But then there was that what was it? I think was it Thomas Hobbes? I feel like this is where like having somebody who can like look things up for me would
Fact
be,
check.
yeah,
Yeah,
fact checker,
yeah.
some guy who's just like, hey, I got the research right here, look at this. Instead of breaking up my conversation. But one of the guys, yeah, Thomas Hobbes was the guy who wrote the Leviathan. That's a very famous book. Oh yeah, John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Those are the three. Those are three main starter philosopher people that I think in universities, at least in the university I went to, they teach that. Like those are the philosophy 1000. Um, but so these three had different perspectives on what humans' nature is, right? How they progress in life. So they have the tabula rasa, which was John Locke. I'm pretty sure John Locke was the guy that told, and I feel like I should just stop naming names because if I'm wrong on these, this is gonna backlash. This is gonna be one of those like, you said this, you dumbass. This is not the truth. But fundamentally, I know I'm right on these people are the ones that are talked about this. But then there was the other guy, which I'm not going to name because maybe I'm wrong. He talked about how human nature is just automatically evil and it's selfish. It's like it's this idea that all humans are born to desire whatever they want and they will get whatever they want. And the only thing that's limiting them is government and like civilization and society. Like you need some sort of power, some sort of, I think this was in the book, The Leviathan. I think that's the Thomas Hobbes. He said that like, hey, listen, this person starts off as this maniacal, like evil person or whatever. He might not have said that detail and meant that evil, but we all are super, super selfish. And the only reason we don't act on these selfish behaviors is because we have checks and balances. Excuse me. So where am I going with that? Need some time to think.
We're talking about equating it to I guess the main subject of death and what it and how it's portrayed in today's society through stories and how we look at it. And how I had said that evil per
Oh,
I would
there's
say
more. Yeah, right.
there's a I would say a lot more there's a lot of evil in the world that wins a lot of the time, like with books, like
Right.
yeah. Anyways,
And I'm remembering now that once you just brought up the word evil, um, the reason I went to these guys was this talk about like, there's more good. You said that there's more evil than there is good. And I mean, that I think a lot of it can be a matter of perspective, where we are. Like,
yeah.
it's a simple, like optimistic versus pessimistic view,
Yep.
but there's still that fundamental, like, we don't like evil, but well, this is actually, I feel like we're changing it, but changing the topic, but at the same time, it's good. But the idea is this, it's almost like the question of like, what is evil?
Yeah. Yeah.
And which is such a deep and difficult question to answer. But everyone's evil in like stories and stuff, like even just like talking about religion to religion, right? One religion has a view on something. And I'm not trying to say if one's wrong or one's right. It doesn't, that's
Yeah.
irrelevant in this point. But it's just they have these difference of views. So one might do an action as if it's it and believe that it's good, whereas the other one will be like, no, that's evil, right? And there's nothing directly evil about that action potentially, except for that change in perspective. And that is what needs to be portrayed in these stories and movies and stuff, is to show that evilness has many forms. Like we could talk about Star Wars for a second and talk about Darth Vader. So when Darth Vader became Darth Vader in episode 3, you have this character who had good intentions but did definitely evil things, right? And progressively evil. But like you think of the moment where before he actually turns evil, like in, I think it's episode 2, where he kills all the Sand Raiders or the Tusken Raiders. He kills them all because they killed his mom, right? So they killed his mom and he's just out for revenge. He's in a fit of rage. I think that anyone who listens to this, anyone, me and you both sitting here, if something bad happened to someone that we loved, we might not act on them and there might be a lot of restrictions, but we would definitely have feelings of revenge and anger and want to boil out into that just explosive murder all of them, like kind of thing, right? I mean, maybe murder all of them. Hopefully we're not having Tusken Raiders steal our wives or moms or whatever, right? But but it's just one of those things where like, no matter what happens, like even if your mom dies from cancer or dementia or something, you could be really mad at the world. You can get a spiritual anger towards like a higher power or some sort of other thing that you might be blaming for that cancer. And that is just a natural feeling. So I would argue that in that moment, Darth Vader, or in that time, Anakin Skywalker, wasn't really acting on evil. He was acting off of pure emotion, which, I mean, technically the Sith are emotion-based force users. But it's still, there's that level of he's progressing towards becoming evil. It's that, oh man, I could keep going on and getting tangents on I wanted to talk about Batman there for a second, but dude, it's a deep topic, man. But I mean, dude, you got something to?
Well, I was just gonna say, like, even on the subject of like the So, like, even with the subject that you brought up with Anakin and the Tusken Raiders, I mean, Tusken Raiders for them, within the Star Wars universe, them pillaging and killing people that aren't Tusken Raiders. I mean, that's just their way of life. That's how they are. That's their natural laws for them. Whereas for like somebody like Anakin, that's not his natural. That's or like even Anakin's mom, that's not natural. And so them killing. So what's evil to the Tusken Raiders and what's evil to Anakin? Well,
Right.
Anakin going in and slaughtering all the Tusken Raiders, that is evil to the Tusken Raiders. And I mean,
Correct.
generally speaking, I mean, murder
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
both ways you can classify that as evil, and so there's a difference between the justification where the Tusken Raiders are justified in what they're doing and Anakin is justified in what he's doing because they took something from him, so he's gonna take something from them as well. And so yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, yeah, people's emotions and perspective, and yeah, mainly people's perspective on what's evil and what's bad, what's good. And there was something else I was going to say, but I can't remember it right now. I had it in my head and then it just went away.
Dude, I don't know, man. Is something about doing this type of thing where you're just talking to a screen or, talking to another person? It just has this like, you get these moments of like, wait a second, I'm trying to talk to more than just the person I'm having a conversation with. And that causes this, like, I don't know, at least in myself. I'll just use me as an example. But I've in the already multiple times in the podcast throughout the history of recording these, I've gone through like, just blank moments, like, excuse me forgetting about what I was talking about with the narrative and why I brought up those first philosophers. It's like I just the sauce was gone, like, and I don't feel like I do that as often in just like normal day-to-day life, but for some
No.
reason it's just like I don't know, there's a void that hits you. But yeah, like, so each person has their own perspective. Each group has their own perspective on what action is okay, right? And
Yeah.
I think in a narrative, we've totally gone off of what plot armor and all that stuff, but that's fine because I feel like that had more impact in like the narrative purpose of a story and why that story can kind of what sort of impact that story then causes on you, right?
Well, I mean, even like sorry to cut in,
No,
but
no.
even like with what we're talking about, good and evil, about people's perspectives. I mean, the narrative of the story that you're getting, the author is giving you a certain perspective of the story. They're not giving, a lot of times most books or stories, it's very limited perspectives.
Right.
Very very rarely is it a perspective of everybody's perspective of the protagonist's perspective of why they do what they do or how they got to where they are, or like different things like that, to where it's like you're only getting you're a lot of times you're getting like the main perspective of what the author or director is wanting to portray. That's the perspective they're wanting to give, and that's what they're wanting to focus on, versus all the other perspectives that are around. So the narrative definitely changes within different stories, according to what perspective is being portrayed,
Right.
and just what perspective of death on how the audience wants to feel about death. If death in certain cases is good or death in certain cases are bad, just like Anakin killing his mom, a lot of us, or not killing his mom, killing those Tusken Raiders for his mom, a lot of us resonate with that, because if they did the same thing to our mom, like you said, we would be angry, and I feel like the majority of us relate to that because we want to pretty much do the same thing. And I guess that's a hard question to ask. Everybody's got to ask themselves, but I mean, realistically, a lot of us would want revenge in some form, and so we relate to that more so when it comes to
Yeah.
death. So sometimes death is good, sometimes death is bad. The protagonist dying, death is good. Sometimes the death is bad if the main character or one of the side characters die. And so, anyways, I know I went on a little bit of a tangent, but
No, no, no. But yeah, I just really wonder how Like, I mean, I've been binging different audiobooks now for quite a few months. I've just been going through series like crazy, dude. Um, and just off of talking about perspective, you could that causes the plot armor, right? So like in a sense, in some stories, I don't think, I'm not saying all, but in some stories, the perspective of being the perspective of watching XYZ character. His name is Tony Stark. You're watching a story about Tony Stark, right? So it's not directly in a first person perspective, but it's
Mhm.
his story. So the chances of him dying during that story is slim because you're listening to his story, right? And unless it's some sort of legend or parable of some guy who lived long, long ago and fought a battle, like in the movie The 300, right? You're learning about this thing that happened long, long time ago, and historically, all those people got wiped out. So when you're watching it, you kind of have this, oh yeah, they're all going to get wiped out, but how strong were they? What kind of things did they have to do? What scenarios did they have to avoid? And um, yeah, totally lost the. We need a perspective. We need a
Well, it's like it's like I've been interested in the, I mean, chatted with you about this before, but I've been
right,
interested in the topic of death, how we view death, and like different culture, like different cultures view death very differently. I mean, portrayed in like Egyptian mythology and like Anubis, or like you have like Norse mythology or Greek mythology, and then you have even nowadays, a lot of majority of times, like the death is viewed in a very negative light on um this, it's a horrible thing, loss, and I know it, and I don't know which cultures per se, but it's fascinating to me, and I need to do a little bit more research, but it's fascinating to me to see that there are certain cultures out there that view death as a celebration. They
right,
celebrate death so that when somebody passes on, um regardless of the views of, if it's like they're no longer trapped in this world, they no longer have to suffer. Even like for me, my grandma, I've got a grandma that she is very, she's wanting death. She's super ill. She has a lot of different conditions, and that makes her life like a living hell. And so she prays for death.
right,
And partially I do too, just because she doesn't want to suffer anymore. She's tired of living. She's really tired of this life. And so that's a different perspective than I would say a lot of people have, of like, no, they don't want to die. Most people, I would say almost everybody, doesn't want to die. And so that perspective, the different perspective of death, I find very interesting. Of sometimes death is celebrated, and I think in most culture, death right now is shown in a very negative light, and death is not celebrated in most cultures in any aspect. So it's an interesting perspective.
but
That,
you kind of touch on a point that I talked about earlier on in one of the earlier podcast episodes of how the perspective of what happens after death shapes how you view death. So your
yeah.
grandmother, if she had, let's say, if she had the same view as me, where death is just a nothing void, because or at least there's no conscious experience, and thus there can't be any sort of like there's no experience, so there can't be any experience after death in the view that I have, right?
Mhm.
Whether there is a soul or not, it to me that there wasn't an experience before, or at least I didn't feel it, don't remember it, right? Um, Therefore I'm going to not remember it after. So your grandma, if she had that kind of perspective of that I have about how what would happen after death, then her desire for death might be drastically diminished.
Oh,
No,
definitely. Yep.
like
Oh, yeah.
like even if there is suffering, and I want nothing but the best for your grandmother, but
Yeah, 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 yeah.
like even if there is suffering, your perspective on what happens after death shapes how you would view wanting like medical assistance in dying made, or like yeah,
Oh, totally. Yeah, and that's where you could definitely have that more of that perspective, that more negative perspective of it's like something that nobody wants, and I mean, like, even being religious, it's not that I want death. It's not that it's not that I
Right.
want my grandma to
Of
die either.
course.
I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
don't I just don't want her to suffer anymore.
Right.
That's really that's what it comes down to. But so I feel like because nobody wants our loved ones to leave, or even like you said, the different perspectives, where belief system comes into play, and how we look at after the what the afterlife is, or if there even is one, definitely does come into play on how we view death, and how, if it's celebrated, or if it's looked as a or if it's mourned, or if it's like bad, good.
Was there ever like a movie or TV show that kind of resonated with your views on what death, like the meaning of death or the cause of death or the aftermath of death? Like, was there ever a story that you listened to and you're like, either that's just, even if it's just that's cool, like that's a really interesting, because like we talked about this main character, you can die multiple times and just keeps coming back. But it like there obviously is reasons why he comes back and it's explained, but
Yeah.
it doesn't do anything to stop diminishing how death is, right? And I mean, even the main character constantly is like, oh yeah, yeah, it's death is just kind of my thing, like
Yeah.
it's just
um oh man, putting me on the spot with trying to think of a story that really resonates.
yeah. I mean, I threw you under the bus. I heard the crunch crunch as the tires went over you, but at the same time, it was just me trying to think of myself if there was any sort of impactful narrative showcases of death. I mean, I love Batman's philosophy on death and how murder, like he can't kill his villains, right? And if he did even one, if he killed one of them, that's just like almost like a slippery slope. And this is like the same thing of and I know there's like lots of people nowadays, I've never seen anything of this, but a lot of people are like, oh, slippery slopes don't exist. I don't know what the
Mhm.
backing is of that or whatever it is, but either way, it's not, I'm not trying to say that slippery slopes exist, but it's this idea that if you do kill somebody, you will have more intention or more acceptance to do it again. Let's just say, right? It's that first one that's like super impactful. It's like any sort of act of the first. Your first podcast, Ben, is going to be is intense. It's going to be like you're either going to be fumbling, you're going to come out of this and be like, "Oh, that conversation was absolute trash." But now, at least you're going to be like, "Oh, I've done it." So then you might be more willing to do it again in the future, kind of thing. And then like it's that concept of doing it once leads to your actions being more willing to do it again.
Yeah.
Um, but with the
Like,
concept of murder and death and stuff, like with Batman, like he can't do that, and he knows that he can't do that, even if the cost of not killing his villains is that they're just keep breaking out of that prison. Which I mean, I don't know why they don't just really ramp up the security. like, like, can't you like, oh, they break out by digging a hole in the wall. Okay, make the wall not diggable. Okay. And then each escape should make the prison much harder to break out of, but I don't know. But anyway, I'm going off there.
it should be in the middle of the sea to where they
Dude,
can't get
like space, man. I don't know. Like figure it
Yes.
out. Like it's one of those things where how does Joker keep escaping, dude? I mean, that
Yeah.
guy's insane. I get he's smart or something, but he never really shows off a hell of a lot of smartness in a lot of the movies that he's been in.
But the subject of like Batman is with him not killing is, I find interesting, just because like Batman, how I always took it was Batman knows his strengths and his weaknesses. He's done a vast amount of training. Like he's at peace with his inner demons. Uh, he knows, sorry, not at peace, but he knows how to control the darkness that's within him, and he knows that if he gives any little bit of leeway to that darkness, that he's gonna go under. It's like he's like on the threshold of like if there's any little bit more, like if he takes that plunge of killing, he's just gonna go all the way up, all the way under. And I think that like with a lot of heroes, I think that there's a sense of that to where they always have to hold back in order to never cross that line of killing, because once, like you said, once they kill once, it becomes
Opens the
easier and
door.
easier. Yeah, it opens that door, and once you have that door open, it's hard to ever close. You know?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like you couldn't ever close it, right?
No.
You've already pegged yourself a murderer, and it,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I always like it's kind of striving, it's pushing away a little bit from death, but um, I loved I love the concept, and this is a narrative story. Uh, this is a story that really resonated with me. Was the idea of the one bad day, and I know I like it. I was just about to hedge, dude. I freaking hate that I do that so often. Um, but I love the idea of the one bad day, right? Where in the you see that the new movie, just Joker, that one.
Mhm. Yeah.
That movie is like that is that concept of that one bad day, right? Obviously, it's not just one bad day that the Joker had there, but
Yeah.
he it was just that tipping point, that one extra push, that one extra day where, a random stranger was horribly rude to him, even though he didn't deserve it, is all it took for him to just go, yeah, you know what? We've boiled out. Like this is, I'm exploding. I'm losing my mind. Like it's the straw that broke the camel's back. It's the pot's finally boiled over. That idea that you have enough bad engagements. Oh, I could talk about this. Yeah, no, let's avoid that. I was just about to talk about a story of my life, but one of those people listens to this story or listens to this podcast. So let's just not throw.
Throw names.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't going to throw in any names, but I was just going to talk about this conversation that I had. Um, well, actually, you know what? I will talk about it. I think it's a good perspective. Um, so it's this concept. So I got reprimanded for missing, like I've just finished renovating, or not just finished. It's still got a little bit of ways to go, but I've been renovating my kitchen, and
Mhm.
it's almost there. The tile guy just finished today. He just did the grouting. So it's literally just got some finishing touches, just a little bit of baseboard here, touch up the floor here, put in the toe kicks and the door handles on the kitchen cabinets and stuff. Excuse me, easy stuff. Um, but I like I was told that okay, I didn't clean up the kitchen properly before X, Y, and Z showed up, right? And there was just this small ring on a pot that was like, a pot or a bowl or whatever. It left a little ring mark on the fresh new countertop, right?
Mhm.
But so I got reprimanded for that, and I got kind of snapped. I was like, okay, no, I'm not accepting this, because it that perspective of seeing just that one bad thing that you did, that one little like forgetfulness of wiping down the counter properly, whatever it was, whatever your reasons were, which you had reasons, even if it was just simply being lazy, that's less of a okay reason. But I got reprimanded for this, not cleaning that up. But every time I cooked in this new kitchen, I've cleaned up like thoroughly, much more than I had in the past. I'd be like much more willing to just toss a pot to the side, clean it up
Yeah.
later, kind of thing. But so I've the kitchen, every time I've cooked, it's gone from horrible mess to clean, right? But I missed this one ring from a bowl just sitting on the counter, right? And I got reprimanded for it. And I was like, no, I don't accept that, because you're not seeing all the cleaning I did do. You only are seeing the cleaning I didn't do. You're
Mhm.
looking at this one negative, this one thing that I failed at doing, and I'm getting punished, even though I did all the good things. Like, for example, my brother once got really mad at me for not closing cabinet doors in the kitchen, or closet doors or whatever. Not just like I just open it up, grab my jacket, and leave the door open, right? Small minor thing, but it was just like a gripe, right? A little picky, like what do they call it? Pet peeve.
Yeah.
So then I start, after he says this, okay, sure. Yeah, I'll close the doors. Weeks go by. I've been closing the doors much better than I have in the past. I leave one open, either because I was just coming back to it or whatever. Like I said, my reasons are my reasons. But I left the one door open. My brother then just screams at me. It's like, you did it again. You did it again. You left this door open. And then I'm looking at him like, no, I don't feel like I've shut the door now, whatever, this small minor thing. I've closed all these cabinet doors every time since you've told me, except for this one time. And I'm getting yelled at again because of this one failure, but you never gave me positive reinforcement over those weeks of closing it. And maybe like, I know his reasoning. I've had the conversation with him. I know his reasoning for that specific situation was like, you should just do it anyway, right? It's not something you should be commended for, right? And that's fair. But at the same time, I'm just constant. It's just, no matter what I do, it'll be a constant punishment. So long as I'm less than perfect, which we all are. So it's just one of those, like, it feels just like, okay, now you just hate me. You're just mad at me, right? Like I can't be perfect.
Mhm.
We've definitely gone off, but
No,
take
no,
this.
I like
I
this. I guess this subject, I think a lot of people can resonate with because, like even like within within my life with like marriage, me and my wife, it's kind of a very similar thing, of like you, the majority of the times. I mean, and I know everybody's guilty of doing this, of where you there's something that bugs you, and time that the person does do it, you notice it, but every time or doesn't, or like in your case of the closet, or leaving the closet door open, it everybody notices the times that bugs them, that pet peeve. They notice it, but they don't notice all the times that they don't.
right,
And so, even if it's like once every 6 months, um, they're still going to notice it,
right,
and they're going to bring it up to you, and you're gonna be pay for it, because but people will notice negative way more than they'll ever notice any positive.
right.
That's just humans just do that. We like, I think maybe it's because by nature we're pessimistic, and we have to force ourselves to be optimistic. But like, it just
I
with
think
anything, it's like the bad, like your bad days, going back to the Joker, your bad days will always outshine a lot of your good days. Bad moments in you throughout your day will always, a lot of time,
right.
will outshine the good moments throughout your day. And thus you could have a good day 90% of the day, but that last 10% is bad. It's like all of a sudden you had a bad day, you know,
Yeah.
because you ended your day on a bad note, and so you had a bad day. But
Oh man, there's like bartending for years. You encounter so many different people, and you serve them so many different times, right? And you won't remember all the good times, all the good conversations that you had at the bar, all the good um moments of showing them that, hey, this drink is amazing, blah blah, look at my skills, these commendations you've had. You're not going to remember all those, but you are going to remember that one time that guy screwed you over, that one guy that uh ran out and didn't pay, that one
uh-huh.
guy that threatened you in some way, that one guy that got so drunk that you had to drag his ass out of the bar, whatever. Those small moments, I have vivid memories of each one of those, much more so than I do of the countless good days that I had, right? And the I think part of, and this is, we don't need to talk about this, but I think part of what I'm realizing with why the one bad day really resonates with me is because of my stance on free will, which I talked about last week. Um, it's this intention thing where, like, I might have done this behavior, I might have done this action, and I might get punished for it, reprimanded for it, or I might get praised, whatever the action is. But all the reason I did that thing was not directly because it was good or bad. it was because of the way that my emotions were in that moment and whatever. So going back, it's like the Joker became, it boiled over to the point where he blew up and killed the guy on the TV screen or whatever, the show host or talk host or whatever. But he did that after a series of misfortunate events. He had nothing but a horrible life, right?
Yep.
And we just completely discount his whole horrible life because all we want to do is punish him for murdering that guy. Obviously, I'm not advocating that he should have done it. But what I'm saying is it's almost reasonable to understand why he did it, right? Like he had so many horrible memories, so many horrible bullying experiences throughout his entire life. And this one thing that was good was this talk show host guy that would talk like when he would watch it at home or whatever, right? And then the one time he goes up onto a comedic thing and fumbles it, and then he's on that show, the clip gets shown, and the guy's making fun of him. It's like the one good thing he had in his life also bullied him. And it's just like, it's reasonable to think that, or reasonable behavior or not. I don't know. It's not.
Oh no, it's totally like even like with different characters and movies and stories. I feel like for me, the villains that I can like, I love a good villain that I can relate to, like the Joker. I mean, you have enough bad days, you'll start to get hardened for like if people are treating you bad enough, more consistently enough, you're gonna start to hate people.
Right.
You're going to hate everything about them because you're being trained to know that people are awful towards you. And so you don't like things that are awful towards you or that are going to impact you negatively like that. And so the Joker just continually had bad day after bad day after bad day after bad day. And so that resonates, or you can relate to that because you're like, like when you have your own bad days, it's like you blow up. There are lots of times where you just have bad day after bad day after bad day to where you feel like you can't catch a break or you can't breathe. There's no breathing room whatsoever. It's just like you just feel overwhelmed, overloaded, and you just want to explode. You want to release all of this bad energy out and a lot of times, like especially if you like, for me being married, a lot of times it'll happen coming out to your spouse because you can't really do that. You can't really do that to, like, you can't go around killing people because you have bad days because and then wake up the next morning and continue life. But
but even less extreme than killing, right? It's not
yelling,
good behavior. Yeah,
no, it's
exactly.
not. It's definitely not. You yelling at me using my wife using me as a punching bag, a verbal punching bag, or vice versa, me the same way. That's not good. It doesn't help our relationship. It doesn't help either of us progress in life in any sense, or doing it to people, like taking your anger out on the cashier because you're having a bad time and he's late with your food or messes your order up. It's like, that's not acceptable behavior. He didn't do anything to deserve that, Right,
exactly. It's projected anger. It's this things that boil up in your life, then you just take it out on somebody else that has nothing to do with it. And I've seen it 100,000 times, and it's one of my biggest pet peeves and one thing that I try to control for myself, but I know that I'm not infallible. So there has been moments, I'm definitely I've noticed it more in my behavior than I think a lot of other people do. A lot of other people that I've encountered that are doing it to me, I've literally watched them. I'm like, I know you're not mad at me for this, right? Like I know fundamentally down to the bone, this is a trivial thing to yell at me for, right? Or whatever, right? Small things. But when I do it myself to other people, I try my damnedest to be very quick with being like, I'm sorry, you did not deserve that. That was not towards you. I was angry about this. I was irritated about that. Like I had a really irritating day. Oh yeah, Thursday I was very irritated. Thursday I was just like, I don't want to, like, I just didn't want to be where I was, right? Working with you out in the cold. No, man. I just was not having it. I was like, I'm freezing my ass off. I'm tired. This is not enjoyable. just like a whole bunch of different factors. And I can't remember, there were some other things like in my life that were work related, but it was just like, I'm just so irritated and I couldn't help but shake the feeling. It's that, but there's philosophy there that you should look at and really try to like resonate with, and going forward in my life, I want to try to hone in on. It's that proverb or whatever it's called, that concept of like, if you stub your toe in the morning, are you going to let it ruin your day? Like
Yeah.
like your whole day gets ruined because you stubbed your toe. You shouldn't let that happen. You shouldn't be dwelling on that stubbed toe, right? It's just it's sure, it's painful, sure it sucks, sure it's stupid, whatever the reason might be, but it's still like, that shouldn't cause you to just feel really bummed out, right? Like yesterday I was planning on going on a date. I had this huge big thing planned. I've been planning this kind of date for a long time, and I didn't have someone to do it with, right? But it's an idea that I really wanted to try, and I thought it would be really fun, but it got canceled. But I did not let that canceling let me down. Like I mean, it did let me down. I won't deny. Didn't enjoy the fact that I didn't get to go on the date, but at the same time, it didn't damage my whole day horribly. I did what I
Yeah.
wanted to do after that. I was like, okay, so I'm not going to be hanging out with her. Let's just, relax and do what I want to do. What do I want to do? I really want to know more about this audiobook I'm listening to. So what did I do? I listened to this audiobook, and I enjoyed it. It's a great
Yeah.
story. Really would recommend it, Ben. I know you're going to listen to it when you actually
Yeah.
got some time. It's so good, dude. It's so good. It gets so intense, man. Um Now I just want to talk about it, dude. Fresh in the
But
mind, man.
uh, I completely agree. Like a good example, like I know we've just been kind of throwing out examples of like being able to not take your bad days out on people. Like
Yeah.
the other day it was like we like that like we were trying to get some floor joists, and I drove into Lethbridge. They had already said that they were there, and so we were like, cool, we're gonna be there to pick them up. Driving to Lethbridge, spending the gas money to go in there. I get there, and the guy in the yard tells me there's been a mix up, they're actually not here. And it's like, even though like it's really frustrating because I just wasted time, which that means time that I'm not making money, and then that's also gas money, wasting gas to go get these trusses or these floor joists, and they're not there, and it's just like, um, I could kind of tell that the yard guy was expecting me to be angry at him. But I was like, in my head, I was just like, it's not his fault. Like he
Right.
it's whoever communicated to say that they were there, it's their fault. Like, and so I'm not gonna take my anger out on this guy. And it is really what good does it do to for me besides venting anger out?
Yeah.
Does it do to even vent it on the person whose fault it is? Like, it's like that only will sour my relationship, make me look like a horrible person, and not the person that I want to show or be to that person. It shows an uglier side of somebody that I don't want to be. And so venting my anger, getting mad at somebody for that just isn't. It is like it's just logically speaking, it's just not beneficial to me in any sense. And so, even though being frustrated and annoyed with the situation, it's like there's nothing I could do about it. And so it brings up a very I guess an interesting. This is a piece of like philosophy that is funny enough. It's where I got this from. This piece of advice is I got this from this guy, and when I was in high school, he had already flunked that grade twice, so he had already been
Oh
held
wow.
back twice. Okay, so I didn't think I was gonna get anything valuable from this guy.
Were you a senior, or like was it final grade 12?
No, so I was a junior, so that's 11th grade.
So he failed junior.
Yeah, I felt junior year
Nice.
twice, got held back twice. And
Yeah.
like I never thought I'd get any good piece of advice from this guy. But he told me, when it comes to situations in life, um you don't let me get my wording together. If there's something you can do about the situation, then do that something about it, but don't stress out about it. Or don't react emotionally to it. But if there isn't anything that you can do about it, then that means that there's nothing you can do about it. So it's out of your control, out of your hands. And so for you, so don't worry about it. It's out of your control. If there's something you can do that something. But it doesn't benefit you to react emotionally about something that is completely out of your hands. That it is what it is, and you have to write it out. And it's kind of like that's it, that situation. The floor joists weren't there. There was nothing I could do about it. And so it's like I can't, even though it's annoying, it's like there's nothing I can do about it. So I just got to keep moving on with my day and ride out until I can get him the next day when they'll be ready. So,
Yeah,
anyways,
like
it was a piece of advice that I was like, holy crap, man! I never ever would have expected you to say something like this.
yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, that's that's a deep mental view. Like that's a deep concept to have, especially at grade 11. I mean, this guy was probably technically like he might have been 19.
Yeah, yeah, much older.
Full
You
facial
know?
hair, this guy, and he's grade 11. But I mean, I don't want to make fun of this guy, but at the same time, it is a funny scenario.
Yeah, it is.
Um, but yeah, freaking all you would end up doing talking to that floor joist, yelling at the floor joist guy, would just be stubbing his toe in this
Mhm.
sense, right? You got your toe stubbed, and then you're just pushing it down the line, and like your toe is still going to be stubbed whether you yelled at him or not. You're just making his toe stubbed, and he's going to remember that day because that was a negative experience he had. As
Mhm.
talking about these negative experiences that we always are going to remember more so than the good ones, like he's gonna remember that day that freaking Ben showed up and just screamed at him for making him drive an hour, right? And then like or drive 2 hours, right? An hour there, hour back. And like he's just gonna be like, wow, dude, what did I do to deserve that? And even if he was the guy that gave you the erroneous call saying, like, hey, yeah, it's ready, we're good. It's still like, people make mistakes, and always it's like we can never yell at somebody for perfection. And
Mhm.
that's what I really wanted to like. I think that's my main point with the not wiping the counter perfectly or not closing every single cabinet perfectly, right? Like it's like I've done better, I've improved, but you don't see them like the improve. You're just seeing the times that I still screw up. The times I still fail, the times I still trip over my foot. Like those are the only times you ever notice, and it's damaging, man. It's one of those things where if you constantly if I got nothing but that every single day for months, I can't imagine myself not coming out evil, right? Like if I got nothing but negative feedback for months, man, I would for sure try to take my anger out on the world.
The start of Shay's new villain arc, you know.
Dude, I mean, I don't get that much negative experience, and I I mean, I'm okay and I accept good criticism,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
but it's one of those like, yeah, I mean, I can't see any other way that would weigh on me. Like I'd get so depressed, dude. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, it's being paid for mistakes. Like you said, nobody's perfect, and so constantly being paid, being punished is the word I'm looking for mistakes, little mistakes. It's like it trains you to either resent that aspect of being perfect, or resent the people that respect resent the people that expect that from you.
I
And
think
so
I
Yeah.
think this might be a good point, and correct me if I'm wrong. But I think it's relatable to the idea if you wanted to train a dog, right? If a dog had bad behavior and you punished it, right? And every time it did anything bad, you punished it. And it was like it was never getting rewarded. You're not getting like you're giving it its same basic meals. You're not giving it any treats when it's shaking its paw and blah 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 when it's doing the things you want. If you're only ever punishing it and you're only ever yelling at it like, oh, don't piss on the freaking couch, you're just so mad. You're just like, stop pissing on the couch. You're just
Yeah.
yelling at this dog. It's not gonna learn to not piss on the couch. It's only gonna look at you and see you as someone who screams and yells at him, right? Or her, right? Like
Hmm.
it's gonna have this concept that you are just a bringer of beatings or whatever, like just negative feelings, and it's just not going to like you. It doesn't learn from the punishment. I mean, I know humans are slightly different. We can learn from punishment, but it has to be in doses, right? You have to come with some positive reinforcement. It's why that idea of like if I'm going to like tell you suck at something, right? I give you a compliment sandwich. I tried to do it a little bit last week with Cody where I was like, I'm going to talk about something negative. I'm going to tell you about this experience that I had. But before that, I'm going to tell you how much I admire you, right? So I'm trying to minimize how much negative feedback he feels and how much it might affect him over the next week or whatever
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
him like feeling like, oh, Shay thought I was really mean to him like years ago. Like, oh man, and I don't want him to beat himself up for it because sure I felt negative about that experience, but we both have grown, and I'm not gonna reprimand him now for something that happened way back then, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the same goes where even like trying to reprimand someone for something right now, if they did this thing that you didn't want them to do, it's like you need to focus on that positive reinforcement of doing the things you want more so than the negative uh the punishment to stop doing the things you don't want, right? We resonate more when we're told like oh, you clean the kitchen, here's a cookie. Like if I got a cookie every time I clean the kitchen, dude, I'd be cleaning the kitchen every freaking day, man. Some random freaking Houdini Santa Claus like figure just appears out of nowhere, here's a cookie. Like if I got something like that, dude, there's nothing stopping me. I would never not clean the kitchen,
Some
right?
type of reward system
Yeah,
just
exactly,
automatically in
dude. Are you
play.
kidding me? I would be all for it. I'd be game, dude. And even if it wasn't a cookie, you give me something else. Like it doesn't matter. 20
Yeah.
bucks. Here's 20 bucks. Whatever. Like there's a bunch of different reinforcing factors, a bunch of positive reinforcement that I can get. But it's always getting those negative feedbacks, man. You're never getting the good positive ones. It's like, dude, it weighs on you and it can't be. We've totally gone off of narrative, but I love this conversation a little bit more.
Well, I mean, like it's even bringing it back to like the whole idea of a like the aspect of negative versus positive impacts that affect our perspective, which thus affects the narrative. I mean, like think about all the you can like you said, you can remember all the negative things that happen way easier than than the positive. And if you're constantly getting dosed with that negative reinforcement, like a dog being trained, and you're constantly being yelled at, and that's all you're gonna focus on.
Yeah.
Like it's gonna outweigh any bit of positive playtime, any bit like I mean, even like raising a kid. If you're constantly like it's funny enough, I saw this video on TikTok. It was talking about parenting,
Right.
and they were talking about how your kid sees more, like they go to school, they see more of their teacher in class than they see their parents. And so if you're waking your kid up early in the morning and you're already yelling at them, hey, get out of bed, why are you not up out of bed, you're
Yeah.
already giving them negative, feeding them
Yeah.
negative day after day after day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then they get home, and then you're telling them, hey, you need to finish dinner, hey, you need to do this, hey, you need to do that, do your chores, do your homework, and it's just constantly more negative, you getting angry at them, and that's just day in and day out, day in and day out. They're not getting any of that love with any bit of time that they actually have for you. And so they're just going to constantly, and then they grow up to be teenagers and they're just going to be rebellious because they don't want to deal with you because because
Yeah.
all they're getting told is just that negative reinforcement constantly over and over, day in and day out. And so it's the video was talking about starting your kids' day off with a more positive note versus a negative, more of a negative note, so that they can do better in school, that they can also have a better relationship with you as a parent. And I think I think it also comes into play with how our lives are, and how we look at life is trying to start our days off right so that we can have a more positive day. And even if negative things happen, there's more positive things to overbalance the negative. I mean, some days we're just gonna have bad days, but we tried to balance those things out. And so, anyways,
I think
to help balance our perspective
this
instead of, anyways, sorry.
this reminds me of something that my mom did when I was a kid. Where occasionally, and it was super rare, but on occasion, I would really not want to go to school or whatever, right? You wake up, maybe you didn't get a good enough sleep or whatever. There's a whole bunch of factors of not wanting to leave to go to school.
Yeah.
But what my mom did on occasion, even if I wasn't sick, there was a few days that I was able to, my mom was just like, yep, no, you don't need to go to school. Don't worry about it. Like, it's not the end of the world taking a day off. But she gave it with the caveat that she's like, okay, you get to stay home, and like, pretend that you're sick essentially. But you cannot go hang out with your friends, right? She's like, the decision to not go to school causes the downside that I don't get to go hang out with my friends after school, right?
Yeah.
I can't go around and play and hang out and have a bunch of fun when I also didn't do the chore, didn't do the thing that I didn't want to do, right? So
Yeah.
if I make the sacrifice that I don't want to go to school, if I don't want to go to work, then I also can't do the things that I want to do as much. Like, I need to make the sacrifice of doing that effort and going to school, and then it's like, okay, then I can go to school. I think my mom had the whole envision that it was like, you're saying that you're sick, so you gotta like act up that you're being sick. But I think there's a deeper like idea or concept there that maybe she didn't even notice. It's just that concept of that you take the day off, you have to deal with the consequences of taking a day off. If I don't go to work, I have to take the consequence of not getting paid. If I don't get paid, I don't get to do my bill, cover my bills, and have enough money for this and blah blah blah. I can't go buy like a whole book series that day because, oh, I didn't work, right?
Yeah.
So there's that like risk reward benefit payment and whatever, but like there's that positive reinforcement that my mom allowed me to take those days off, where it's like, you know what, everyone has a day that they need to just rest, more so than being sick. Because even if you are sick and you can't go to work, you can't go to school, you're not enjoying it. You're not.
No, you're
No,
miserable.
no one's happy that, oh yeah, I get to not go to work. Like, I mean, maybe occasionally it's like, oh, I get to do this thing that I really wanted to do that doesn't cost a lot of physical labor or whatever it is, right? Like,
Yeah.
I've always wanted to read this book. Oh, I get a whole day to read the book. I'm still not enjoying it because I'm sick, right? Like, I'm in a lot of pain. I'm coughing or I'm throwing up or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But everyone needs a few days where they're not sick and they take the day off, where they get to
Yeah.
just enjoy themselves.
Oh yeah, and I think that's fantastic parenting, because you're everything, every action has a consequence. And so you're with that, with parenting like that, you're teaching you're preparing your kids for the future, by teaching them, hey, listen, uh this is how the world actually works. And so if you take a day off, that means that there's consequences to taking a day off.
Yeah.
There's pros and cons to it's representing those consequences of, hey, yeah, you might not get to go to, you might not get to have to go to work, but at the same time you're not making money, or you're not like, it's not always going to be like rainbows and sunshine
Right.
so it's a fantastic way of teaching a child that everything has a consequence, whether it be positive or negative, and sometimes both. I think yeah, I think that's a fantastic way of being able to teach somebody, hey, look, this is how the real world works, especially for kids, because it's you don't see that a lot. Like a lot of kids get a lot of negative or overly positive parents.
Yeah.
That we've talked about gentle parenting from time to, like before, but it's you get those overly positive parents that it's nothing but positive, and there's no negative or consequence to kids' actions, and then that translate when they're adults. And yeah, anyways, so no,
Well,
yeah, I think it's fantastic to be able to that what the way your mom parented.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I won't say any negative things about my mom's parenting. There was many times where, um, there was even one story where she doesn't quite remember it very well. But my mom was having a party at our house, and like it was just a family party. Like our auntie was there, our grandparents were there, kind of thing. And my brother and I were really, really little, but we went out into the snow, and we went onto the like fence, and we're throwing snowballs at cars that would drive by. Classic little kids just doing some silly shit. They don't see the consequences. They just are, doing something that they shouldn't be doing, blah, blah, blah. Anyway,
Yeah.
I had the bright idea to do it. So it's my fault. My brother was just a little follower who's younger than me. So anyway, we did this. One of the guys, as he's driving down the alleyway, he stopped after he got hit by a snowball. He stopped his car, got out of his car, and came barreling that towards us. And he grabbed us by the scuff of our neck. I don't know if he did it with my brother, but he definitely grabbed me and dragged us. He's like, "Where's your which?" We lived in this little condominium, so there's lots of duplicate houses, and
Yeah.
and he's like, "Which house is yours?" And we pointed, and he took us to the house, knocked on the door, and my mom answers it, and I remember like being so scared because I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna get so much shit for this, like I was like so screwed. I was like, oh frick, I didn't realize it was that big of a deal. Um, but so when my mom opened the door and looked at this stranger holding her sons, she looked at him and was just like, gave him a look of like, whatever the problem is, you're overreacting. And I remember seeing my mom's face and going, the second she opened the door, I was like, I'm not in any trouble. I just knew the second my mom opened the door, I was like, my mom doesn't give a shit. She's like, I have two sons. Of course, they're going to get up to some antics, but they're not going to they haven't behaved so bad that they deserve a ton of punishment. And like, this is just the one of the few things that they've done that they shouldn't be doing. But the most they should get is a don't do that again. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
Don't be stupid.
and the way that this stranger just grabbed me by the scruff of my neck and just growling, just like I just picture him as like a freaking rabid dog, just how dare you little kids do this thing. His excuse or something was there could be ice in the snowball and I could crack a windshield or whatever, but I didn't. But anyway, I remember seeing my mom's face and was so like, oh, frick yes, dude. We're getting away scot-free, dude. And I mean, I'm sure we did get a talking to, but it was like, I'm not worried about it. As long as I don't get like grounded or spanking or something, or, something actually negative, I don't get to have dessert for dinner or something, whatever.
It's whatever.
Yeah, whatever my kid motivations were back then. I don't know. I don't know what drove me.
Oh man, that's funny.
But yeah, freaking. I mean, parenting is one thing that I'm not very well versed in. Obviously, I know my upbringing, but
Well, I mean, like I guess you see that guy, he was having a bad day.
Exactly,
He had
dude.
a stubbed toe.
Exactly,
And he
dude.
was trying to stub your toe, man.
Dude, that son of a bitch tried to stub my like 7-year-old toe. What a guy, man.
And then your mom was like, not having any of that. It's like, no, no, no.
No. My kids are having fun, and you're not going to take the smiles off their faces. And I mean, we were getting out of their hair too. My brother and I were outside the house, just playing around. So she was happy that she didn't have to just like constantly like talk to us and babysit us. I was a very inquisitively annoying child. My mom talks about it all the time, where I was constantly asking why for everything. It's like, why? Like,
Why,
like,
mom? Why?
yeah,
Why is
Why
the
do we
sky blue?
why do we got to get gas? Because gas keeps the car moving. But
Why?
why does it why do we need the car to move? Because we need to go places. Well, why do we need to go places? Because I need to do this thing. Well, why do you need to do that thing? And it's just constant, like think of a child like that that's just day in, day out, just constantly asking, why, mom? It's like you have to have
Maybe you want to pull my hair out.
you have to have infinite patience for a child like that. I mean, obviously there's a level of it, like looking back at it, it's extremely adorable. And like one of those things that my mom and I can both laugh about and be like, yeah, no, it was interesting, like to see a kid so inquisitive and so like looking for the answers to the universe, kind of way.
Yeah.
And you want to be able to facilitate that, but even there got to a point, no matter how many like sometimes it was 3 whys or sometimes it was 10, but there got to a point where my mom didn't have the answer. Like, I mean, I think about it now. So I'm 26. My mom had me when I was 27, when she was 27, sorry. So dude, it's a year from now. I mean, I don't have any prospects to have a child in a year, but like the idea of me a year from now having a child is like, whoa. Like, I'm not ready for that. I don't feel ready to, like, I can take care of a dog. But a whole freaking mini me, a little human, a little thing that needs constant attention and needs to be trained on how to live their life and run about the world, like, dude. So anyway, there was like, there always got to a point with those why questions that she's like, yeah, like you mentioned, like, why is the sky blue? Like my mom can't, like, maybe she had a scientific reason to know, but I wouldn't understand that. And like, even if I doubt she did know exactly why the sky was blue. But if I asked that kind of question, she would be like, I don't know. Right. Or I mean, she would, all she could say would be, I don't know. But I remember I was telling my mom about those kind of conversations. And she would say, she would say, because it is, or because of why, like, no reason, but like she doesn't understand why, but she's just going to say that's just the way it is, right? And I remember telling her as an adult, I was like, I really hated when you said that. And she's like, what, really? I was like, yeah, because I always thought it was super frustrating because I don't follow the just because it is, like I didn't agree with that. I didn't like that idea of just, oh, just cuz. No, there's a reason for it, mom. And I want to know the reason. If my mom answered more often with, I don't know, I would have been much more happy. But the occasional time that she was like, that's just the way it is. No, I disagree.
That's just the way it is.
What do you mean that's just the way it is? Timmy's mom doesn't do that, mom. So it's not just the way it is. Gotcha.
Oh, that's so funny.
Oh man, yeah. Freaking, I was a pretty annoying kid.
Something funny that this is getting off topic, but
yeah, I mean, whatever. We've already lost it.
My wife Casey, she was saying, she's like, oh, she's gonna have you on a podcast, and then she made the joke. She's like, so are you guys just gonna be like sitting across from each other, in a wife beater or shirtless, smoking a cigar, like the
with
Tate
my big
brothers.
cobra tattoo.
Yeah. She's like, so you and him are gonna become like start your own podcast, be like Andrew Tate, talk about how women and their rights and stuff like that.
I think I really avoid talking about doing this podcast, at least because like I've talked about this before. It's like I don't advertise it right now. I tell a few people, and some people got mad at me for not telling them sooner, but it's like this idea that like I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to advertise it until I've got like at least 10 episodes, right? Where I have this like background of like, hey, yeah, I actually have done a thing. I've improved on a thing. And like I feel like it's becoming more of a skill than just a hey, guy just talking, right? And I am just a guy talking, but why should you listen to me over someone else? And like I feel like there's that hipster fad of podcasts too, where it's like I'm definitely not putting on my dating profile, if I was on any dating app, like going, oh yeah, I've got a podcast. I'm not ever going to be that guy. I would never brag about the podcast. I mean, maybe if like I did get huge and it got crazy big, I might, but it's just one of those things where it's like I would avoid that because it's just not me. I wouldn't feel comfortable with that person who's just like, yeah, yeah, dude, I've got a podcast. I've had a TED talk. It's like, no, I've done a lot of things in my life, and a lot of them are worth commendation. But do I need to talk about them? No, not really. If they come up in conversation, sure, I'll mention, hey, yeah, no, I did that. Like if we're doing an event planning, yeah, I used to do that in the university. I used to work at the university, and I used to help plan events and organize them and make sure that they ran properly and blah blah. Hated that part of the job. I didn't hate the job, but still, it's like if that was apt, I would tell you about it. But
Yeah, it's you use those in conversations when they're necessary instead of advertising them everywhere. Like it's if your goal is to get um is if your goal is to get more followers and that's what you're shooting for, then advertising is one thing, but bragging is a different thing, like versus marketing what you're trying to do. Um, but I also like I don't know, like I kind of view it as like you also at least with what you've talked to me about this podcast is it's something that I would say what's the term the phrase the word that I would use? Not necessarily like sacred, but it's more like something like that's for you. It's
yeah,
not
yeah,
necessarily for everybody else. It's for you. It's something that you're wanting to do. And like yeah, I could see I resonate with the feeling of not wanting to plaster it everywhere because and this is also you sharing your life
oh
like
yeah,
and opening yourself up in this space. And so if it does blow up, great, but I mean like you've told me, it's something it's specifically for you, and whether it blows up or not, it's for you.
yeah. It's more of
So
an audio journal, and like I talked about this with Cody last week. I was like very clear on trying to be as clear as possible about what this is for, and I have many possible reasons for what the like to use this for, and one of them, the easiest one that comes off my head, is I'm using it for a marker for where I'm at right now. I want a concept, an idea, whatever, a conversation, a person in my life, those types of things. I want those marked. I want that like noted down. I want to have more notice of the good days. Like I want to be I want to be more conscious of the positive moments. And I will sometimes talk about those positive moments. I will talk about the negative, but I'll have a more vivid memory of these scenarios that happened because I had talked about them. And then on top of that, I just love conversation. I love philosophy. And so, yeah, I mean, I feel like I'll probably cut that out of the podcast just because, I mean, I'm sure I've said this 100 times now, but,
well like I
but,
mean yeah I think like right, having a journal is something like regardless of if it's audio or you write it down or whatever, or even a video log, whatever. I think a journal is something that's very, very important, especially like something that say like hypothetically speaking, you do this audio journal, you do this podcast for however long, and then you have all this saved, so that when your kids see this and they're growing up and they can understand it a little bit better, they can see this and they can be like, oh man, this is some crazy stories that they haven't heard of or
yeah,
that you
yeah,
don't even remember. And they can and it can be an audio log for a knowledge for your kids,
yeah.
like different golden nuggets that you
Learnings.
have, yeah,
Yeah.
learning, but also they get to know their dad, they get to know their dad really well, um, because of it. And so, like, I don't know, like, when I went and served my two year religious mission, we had to keep a journal and we had to write down. I wrote down a ton of different stuff, and so sometimes going back to the different days, especially like hard days of being in a third world country, completely out of my comfort zone, and just having to learn a whole new language and trying to communicate with people, and just tough days, like going back and seeing a bunch of seeing that information of different memories that I had that I completely forgotten about, to be just a reminder of them is nice to for a journal. And I personally, you've inspired me to want to write a journal, and
Really?
to just to document, because it is something that's really beneficial. It's something
Yeah,
beneficial
it
for
is.
yourself, but it's also beneficial for kids and other people as well. So
I
you've inspired me.
really, that's awesome. I mean, I want to say that I think part of my reasoning for this is we talked about it last week with me and my half brother talking about. I mean, I don't know if we ever actually literally mentioned it, but um, our father passed away when we were little kids, and um, there's very little evidence about him. I don't have any audio journal. I don't have he didn't write in a journal at all. I don't have any sort of like recordings of him. I only have secondhand accounts of who he was, right? And this it's not that I don't hate it. It's one of those things where you wish once you get to a certain point, especially as a person raised in it by a single mom, you get to the certain point where you're like, I want to know who he was. And I don't and I know now as an adult, I look at my friends and I think back, I think of an idea. Like if I had a kid right now, and sure my wife would have a plethora of information about me. So I
Mm-hmm.
can always go to my mom and ask about what he was or whatever. But at the same time, they know a certain side of him. They don't know all of him, right? They you never truly know everything about that person. Or like I mean, I could use you as an example, right? You watch a good anime, right? Your wife doesn't do that. Doesn't watch anime, doesn't like it, whatever. Everyone has their own reason for liking or disliking, but they she doesn't like that. So that's a part of you that she doesn't quite understand. And to get that understanding, you need to like watch that with the person or need to do that with the person. So I always look at that and I'm like, man, even if I had a wife and I had kids and I died and then my wife was telling stories about me, she wouldn't have the same perspective as some of my best friends would because they've known me. Well, first of all, my best friends would know me for much longer, but they'd
Yeah.
also know a certain side of me where I'm just joking around. I'm shooting the shit. I'm talking out my ass. There's nothing there. There's no intelligent word coming out of my mouth. It's just me blabbering about dumb shit, right? That's something that they would only my best friends would really have a good perspective of, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is something that they would be the only ones able to tell to me as or like my father's best friends would only be able to tell me because my mom wouldn't know these things. But my
Yeah.
mom's not going to like unless they were in some friend group that for a long time. My mom's not going to keep in touch with my dad's best friends after he died, right? There was a
Yeah.
few instances when I was younger that we did go to see some of my dad's good friends, but it was so sparse and rare. And I mean, one of the ones that I don't remember where it was, but I remember being super sick and I puked in my dad's friend's bathroom. So that was little kid me was, it wasn't a good experience. He's not going to talk to a 7-year-old and be like, yeah, your dad did this. Your dad
Yeah.
did that.
Yeah.
You need to be an adult for that kind of encounter to have any sort of weight or any sort of
Yeah.
actual gaining towards the knowledge or whatever, right? So anyway, that's another reason for this is that concept of I can keep that more you like my kids if I died before in a not of old age, so they didn't get to see me become a grandpa or whatever. They can hear my voice for hours and hours for nothing. Like, I mean, sometimes I'm not talking about anything important, but that's fine because you're still getting a good perspective of me and how my brain thinks and my conversation and how it flows or whatever, my ideas that pop in my head and
Well, even if you do it for like a couple of years, like they can. I think one of the coolest things is that you can see the growth and the development that you have from now until you stop doing the podcast. Um, you can see that growth and that development that you have, and you're pretty much taking your kids, your grandkids, or like however many generations, you're taking them on your journey, like a journey that you have,
Yeah.
and so, which is cool. Like you're pretty much you're writing your own story, or telling your own story through this podcast.
Dude, what a way to bring it full loop, man. What a way to bring it all the way back. Thank you, Ben, for that one. Beautiful. Beautiful, dude. It just all flowed into this. That was the reason for why. That's the reason. We found the reason. We didn't know it at first, but now we know why we talked about all that narrative. Is because this whole podcast is a story of me. And if I died, then you're still gonna have the story of me before I died.
I mean, even if you die at old age, man, your posterity, generation after generation. I mean, you just keep it records of
Yeah. Oh,
great
absolutely.
grandpa Shay.
Well, I don't think I've mentioned this, but I used to do that. Oh, actually, maybe I have, but whatever. I used to do this thing and I haven't done it in the last few months. It's stuck on April, but I have a calendar in my room, a white erase calendar that I like was writing down just like single sentences about what my day was. And I can look back at that. So I haven't wrote in it since April and it's still on April. So it shows all the days I did in April this year. And it's funny because I look back at those and I read just the small little sentence like me and my brother watched a movie, right? Like, or it might be more specific of what movie, whatever, right? I can look at that and I'm like, I remember that exact scenario. I remember me and my brother, and this is going to sound very Andrew Tate-esque, but me and my brother smoking cigars out in the backyard and then just coming in to watch a good movie, like it's just like yeah,
It's funny.
but that calendar is like a wicked, dude. It's a wicked way to just like kind of have a note-taking memory of those days. Small little things, like whatever it was, even if it was just like I worked from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., right? And then you just go, okay, that's what I was doing that day, right? Even if I did a bunch of things at the end of the day, that's not that big of a deal. I still have a better memory of that day, having just wrote down a small little sentence about it.
Yeah.
And I want that. I want to remember more of the positive, because we talked about that. The negative is just so easy to remember, but I want to remember more of the positive. I also want to remember more about my days. Like if I'm something that I'm sure that if it hasn't been clear so far in this podcast journey, it will be, is if I'm talking about my childhood, I'm talking about some age of some event in my life, I blanket a time of like 8 years old to like 12. Like if I don't know exactly how old I was, I'll be like, I was somewhere between 8 and 12. Like I say that almost with every one of my childhood stories. Like I can't tell you what year it was, how old I was specifically. There's small things that I know. Like I went to Disneyland when I was 12, and I know it was 12 because when I was 13, I got myself first cell phone. So it was my birthday that we went to Disneyland. So it had to be obviously on my birthday. But I know that on my 13th birthday, I got my cell phone. So then therefore it's like, that one's clear as day to me to figure out exactly how old I was. But the rest of my stories, dude, like when I was throwing those snowballs, man, I said 7, dude, could be different. Could be some other age. I could be 6, could be all the way up to 8. I don't know. I know I was small. I know that fences were something I had to climb up of. So I couldn't be too old. I couldn't have been any higher than 10, because if I was 10, I wasn't huge at 10, but I was tall enough that like fences weren't looking so big, right? But I remember the fence was a freaking ladder that I had to climb. So especially for my little brother, man, because if I was 7, he was 5. So that little boy had to hike up that freaking fence. But yeah. I don't know. I think this might be a good point to end her here. I don't know
Yeah.
about you, unless you got something
Well,
else.
no, I was just gonna say that yeah, it's with everything that we've talked about with the narratives, stories, the storylines, that's a big subject that me and you talk about with books.
Exactly.
I I really enjoy that conversation. I enjoy the conversation that we've had with during this podcast about stories, about narratives, about even the fact that you're telling your own story from your perspective. And I appreciate you having me on.
Hey,
And
man, this was not.
hopefully I'll be able to be on at another time. You know,
Oh yeah, of course.
self-inviting myself.
He enjoyed it so much. I'd be kind of interested, and I don't know if like I love the one-on-one, and it's really good, but maybe having like two people, extra obviously than me, might be a
Yeah.
very interesting dynamic to have three people total on the podcast. You know, it might add a little bit extra. It might. I'm obviously don't want to go too much. I don't really want to go bigger than that. I think three is probably like a max in a sense,
Yeah.
but it would still add like a good three-way perspective on different things. And if we got different people anyway. So, but yeah, of course,
Yeah,
you're very welcome to come again. I'll invite you whenever the mood strikes me. You know, I'm a fickle man who's got, you know, emotions, and those emotions, you know, sometimes it's like I don't want to talk to Ben. I worked with him all week, man. I don't want to see that guy again. All right, listen, he's
I don't want to hear his
I'll
voice
see
in the
him on
weekend.
Monday, dude. I don't need to
Yeah.
see him on freaking Sunday too. Like, come on, no, I'm just kidding.
That's funny.
It's not that, but yeah. So I'll end it here. Thanks for listening.